Hello, welcome to another Dav Chat. I was so energized by talking to my friend Dee that I've come back. Also, my son's playing computer games. Frees up time a little bit. I wanted to say, first of all, go Joe, and boo to anybody who's so ignorant of historical precedent, of current likelihood of the Heritage Foundation preparing for legal challenges to any changes to the ballots, because primary elections have happened. President Joe Biden, with all the advantage of the incumbency, decisively won those with an average of 87% of the vote. 87%. People should calculate, because it's higher than the percentage Trump got in his primary elections for the Republican primaries. There was consistently between 10 and 30% of the Republican vote going to Nikki Haley, even months after she dropped out of the race, indicating Republicans are in disarray, and the media, for whatever reason, is obscuring that fact. Republicans are in disarray because their nominee is a convicted felon. For as long as that ruling that jury of peers verdict manages to hold in light of the Supreme Court making Trump a king with not only future immunity from criminal prosecution, but retroactive immunity from criminal prosecution, including implications that might be deemed to impact his 34 convictions for committing fraud, document fraud, by perpetuating a scam against the American public in violation of various election law statutes, and in violation of laws regarding accurate keeping of business documents and business records, because Trump conspired with others to pay back Michael Cohen $130,000 that Michael Cohen had taken a second mortgage out on his house to obtain money to pay Stormy Daniels for her signature on a non-disclosure agreement, ensuring that she would not disclose to the public that she had had an affair with Donald Trump some years prior, whilst his most recently born son, Barron, who's now 18, but was then a newborn child, to his most recent wife, his third wife, Melania Trump. And that story of that interaction between Stormy Daniels and the public would have been a critical story at that time, given the release of the Hollywood Access tapes, in which the public had heard Trump confess in his own voice, or those of the public that had paid attention had heard Trump confess to his own sense of entitlement, that he believed fame granted him the ability to grab women, to do anything he wanted, to grab women by the genitalias, to pop a tic-tac so that he could just start kissing beautiful women because he's attracted to them like a magnet. A man who thinks he can have what he wants if it's pleasing to him, regardless of whose expense, regardless of what decorum dictates are violated. So that is the kind of man who is the Republican candidate. Shut the hell up about President Biden, to all of his detractors, any and all of them. I don't care who you are. You're probably a white male pundit, but even if you're a female pundit or a non-white pundit, you can also shut the hell up, because the primary elections were conducted to reveal the will of the people, and the will of the people supported the incumbent president. They understand that it's an advantage to have an incumbent president. Trump was an incumbent president. He got kicked out of office. He was a one-term president, very unusual. I think, was it Glover? What's the president who, I'm going to Google it, former president who, other presidents who only had one term. Hope this is not too noisy typing. Well, I just get random bollocks about Joe Biden. Okay, well, JFK only served one term because he was assassinated. I'm looking for Grover Cleveland. They've raided them and they've gone all sorts of nonsense. Donald Trump was, yes. Donald Trump and his supporters have repeatedly claimed that the only reason he's not currently serving a second term is that the election was stolen from him, a claim that has been evaluated and disproven. Trump was often criticized for largely serving as president only of his political base. That's a key difference between Biden and Trump. Biden doesn't serve as a president for only Democratic voters or Democratic areas of the United States. He is a living embodiment of the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. He has instituted the Inflation Reduction Act that is a conduit for huge investment in not only jobs, not only infrastructure, but well-paying jobs through use of investment in various technologies, through judicious use of tariffs, unlike Trump, who is, as per typical fascist, a big posturer, a big look at me, I'm initiating a tariff war with major American trading partners that resulted in calamitous outcomes for the American agricultural sector, for the American manufacturing sector that was in recession in 2019. Did the media make a big deal about that? They were making some burbling noises, but it hadn't yet reached mainstream media to the extent that it became a narrative, like, oh, everybody's talking about it, so now we'll talk about it some more. The media won't acknowledge their role in initiating narratives. They'll only talk about what the public's talking about as if it's organic, as if they themselves are not the feeder organization to the public in terms of what they talk about. Now, social media is also used by bad faith actors to generate false narratives to then be discussed and taken up by the media as if they have some validity or truth. Bad faith narratives, and also just over amplification of individual crimes and things that happen in a typical fascist tendency that I can report a historical parallel in relation to, in that Hitler published a newsletter on a regular basis to document crimes committed by, guess who? Jewish people. And he did so in order to inflame public sentiment against Jews, to make the public, to deceive the public into thinking that the only people who commit crimes are Jews. And so that if you don't like crime, then you don't like Jews existing in Germany. It's an implied conclusion that you get from that narrowing of focus on people in your outgroup that you are stigmatizing and vilifying. And that is what Trump is doing to undocumented migrants in order to make people feel like if they oppose crime, if they are horrified by criminal activity, horrified by people being murdered or raped, etc., then the answer to that is to end the existence of undocumented migrants in the United States. It's an easy and wrong answer, because the rate of crimes committed by undocumented migrants is smaller than the rate of crimes committed by people who are native born to the United States. Probably a function of people trying to avoid being imprisoned or deported, and just having some more anxiety to be a factor in their governance of their own behavior. But regardless, the point is, lots of people who are already in America, who are citizens or who have green cards or visas, etc., commit crimes. You don't eliminate crimes by eliminating the presence of undocumented migrants in your society. What you would do to your society is massively increase inflation and increase an economic downturn. The American economy right now is the envy of the world. It's the most it's the highest GDP. It's the most energized economy in the world, and it's believed that the American economy, the strength of it, is actually lifting up neighboring economies. It's helping contribute to economic growth in other parts of the world. So, look, either you're with Biden, pick up an oar and start rowing in the right direction. I don't want to hear a word out of these mealy-mouthed bigots whose soft bigotry stops them from understanding that racism is still very much a factor in US electoral politics, and that Joe Biden is a reassuring depressor to the neurotic tendency to indulge in racism. He is a reassuring person to older white people who maybe fear that things will be taken from them in order to redress historical injustices. They don't want to lose what they have for reparations. And reparations are actually easier than people think, because America gives money to a whole bunch of things all the time, and actually making a move to take steps to address a lot of accumulated injustice of the financial fallout of willfully excluding returning Black servicemen from GI benefits, willfully excluding Black customers from obtaining mortgages with banks in certain areas, the practice of redlining, the practice of gatekeeping certain white-collar jobs that have good government-backed healthcare benefits. Those practices, some of them are more historic. GI returning soldiers receive the same benefits now in a more equitable way, but and redlining has been explicitly made illegal in certain areas. But there is a lot of soft discrimination that still goes on because of the power of inertia, the power of accumulated tendencies, and an accumulated tendency to believe that tribal loyalties were there for a good reason, that white people do have that innate superiority that they appointed themselves with when they determined that Black people should be enslaved, and that had religious backing and theoretical and philosophical backing and was somehow not immoral. Now, those of us who live in reality can understand that no, the religious backing of the enslavement of Black people that had been stolen from the continent of Africa and brought to the United States, it wasn't moral, it wasn't religiously justified. There's no sound religious justification for it. There's no sound philosophical or rational justification for it. It's just a vicious, wicked practice. Wicked sounds like an old term. It's an immoral practice. People who rely on religion for their morality can't exactly turn to the Bible for condemnations of slavery. As far as I understand it, I'm not a regular reader of the Bible, but I believe there's some references to enslaving defeated tribes in the Bible, at least in the Old Testament part. What about the New Testament? What does the New Testament say about slavery? Regardless, a lot of Republicans who profess to be Christians, whether evangelical, Protestant, or Catholic, many evangelical, particularly religious people, still like to pretend that the US doesn't have a history of racism and doesn't have a present in which racism colors outcomes for people. It colors how much people's houses are appraised at, for goodness sake. It's still a very significant factor in people's lives that are, what's the opposite of beneficiary? That are the recipients of racist outcomes. People I see on Twitter even now who have locked in a house for purchase only to find out that the seller of the house repudiates their agreement, reneges on an agreement to sell a house to someone once they find out that the person wanting to buy the house is Black. I mean, racism exists in a lot of individual circumstances now, but also in a bigger picture sense. The vestigial limb of American racism is the Electoral College system, because it disproportionately empowers white rural voters. It gives their votes greater significance. It empowers white rural voters to overturn the results of the popular vote. It has done so multiple times. I'm not whining about this for the sake of whining. I'm explaining it so that people understand how important it is to actively mitigate against this thumb on the scale for the inertia of racism within the American political system, that the popular vote results are set up to be overturned whenever there is a greater gulf than normal between rural and urban voting systems, rural and urban vote majorities, and rural majorities will just plant the results of a popular vote through the Electoral College system, which appoints scores to different states, but gives smaller states disproportionately large power to determine the president, to determine the outcome, in stark contrast to whatever how many millions of voters have chosen one particular president over another. It is not the same as democracy. The Electoral College system is a manipulated democracy that gives undue influence to white rural voters who are not guaranteed to be racist, but who have a more significant history than other areas of being the beneficiaries of entrenched racism in the form of a slave economy, in which they derived extraordinary profit, and adjacent industries derived extraordinary profit from the practice of denigrating Black people as being worthy of enslavement by white people. When you don't acknowledge the racism at the heart of that presidential electoral quirk, racist quirk, then you don't understand why Biden is the president for the moment, and that you don't surrender the advantage of incumbency for any reason. You don't surrender it because the president made a gaffe. He's performed incredibly last night at a NATO conference and at a second press conference as well. He's an incredible man with a grasp of what is at stake, with an incredible grasp of foreign policy, with an incredible grasp of how to overcome the built-in obstructionism into the US political system, the three branches of government that purport to have various checks and balances, but in fact, through the more recent historical edition of the filibuster, give racists, once again, disproportionate, unwarranted power to block legislation that would benefit the American people, that would favor those who are afraid of policies to benefit people because they're afraid of allowing Black citizens of the United States to receive equal benefits. They fear sharing. And those people who are represented by various elected Republicans, but even the periodic elected Democrat, and I'm thinking here specifically of US Senator from West Virginia, which is a Republican-leaning state, but they have a Democratic senator in the form of Joe Manchin, and he was afraid of sharing. He is an adoptee of the idea that it spoils people to have help for those in need. And he voted against the child tax credit. So even though it had lifted millions of American families out of poverty, Joe Manchin ensured that many of those families would return to more impoverished circumstances and not have those much needed funds to do things such as help equip their children for school, help. If you don't acknowledge that there's been various panders to the people who are allergic to sharing. They're allergic to paying a fair share of taxes. They're allergic in a metaphorical way to a government that rules to the benefit of people of every color in this country. And Joe Manchin shares a lot of that philosophy. That's a lot of drivers of his voting behaviors, and he voted against maintaining the child tax credit. If US voters can get it together enough to return a strong majority in the Senate for Democratic candidates, a strong majority in the House, and a strong president to office, President Joe Biden, then you can have a more functional society once again, and you can have a return of the child tax credit system, which helps people with children to have a functional existence in this country. Because this country needs people to have children, as well as needing migrants who come in and enrich this country with an injection of energy, spirit, and the elevated standards that migrants bring, because they are people who have self-selected for energy and drive and aspirations. People who come to this country to make a better life for themselves are self-selected for people who will do almost anything to help grow their families' stability and grow their families' opportunities and wealth. And that is an energy that lifts all boats. A lot of new businesses in the US are started by migrants or by the first generation children of migrants. It's an important energy, and you can Google migrants starting businesses rate of in Harvard Business Review and see study after study that illustrates the key factor to the engine of US growth being migrants. Did that sentence get where I needed it to go? I think it did. I'm going to quickly refer to Twitter. I promised to talk about the Logan Act, and the Lincoln Project in 2022 wrote it out. The Logan Act, 18 US Code 953, makes it illegal for US citizens to engage in unauthorized foreign diplomacy, including to influence the measures or conduct of any foreign government or to defeat the measures of the United States. So the Lincoln Project noted that in relation to Elon Musk, who was reported in October of 2022 as speaking directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin before tweeting a proposal to end the war in Ukraine that would have seen territory permanently ceded to Russia, it has been claimed. So Elon Musk may have denied that. I'm perfectly happy to believe it, because Elon Musk acts like a useful idiot for Russian President Vladimir Putin all the time. He continues to advance disinformation about migrants somehow voting, migrants who would face significant punishment if they voted in a US election. There's legal consequences, and he perpetually retweets other people saying things like Democrats are trying to win the election by allowing undocumented migrants to cross into the United States and encouraging them to vote for Democrats. So a whole bunch of hooey, self-serving hooey though, because it would help Donald Trump be elected to office and further the relationship between Elon Musk, or further the ability of Donald Trump to recompense Elon Musk for his $44 billion purchase of Twitter and perversion then of that social media platform to be more favorable to Nazis, anti-migrant propaganda, and so to a Trump, the prospects of a Trump election victory. So yes, Elon Musk was violating the Logan Act to try and conduct diplomacy directly with a foreign head of state. And of course, Donald Trump yesterday met with Viktor Orban, the despotic leader of Hungary. And as this Twitter account, Marlene Robertson, notes, Trump is violating the Logan Act in clear sight, but the media and the GOP pretend it's perfectly normal. So it's a law that's never been prosecuted. And that's presumably why the Department of Justice doesn't do it, because they fear the backlash they would get. Are we going for a walk now, darling? Okay. I'm going for a walk with my family. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the broadcast, feel free to recommend it to your friends, share it on Twitter, share it on YouTube, and please chime in with comments or suggestions anytime you want. And get on board. Pick up an oar and get on board for democracy. Go Joe. Go the incumbent. Go the incumbent team. The Biden and Harris administration, thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you for being exemplary citizens and public servants. I am so grateful today and every day, and I wish you every success, and I will do everything I can. I will raise my voice every day in support of this team that has worked so hard for the American people, that saved them from a second Trump term and will, fingers crossed, save them from a second bite at the cookie that Trump has in running for office, even after committing open insurrection against the United States and the system of democratic government here.